This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 22nd of April, 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm 2.
I am CS.
Wow. And in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, outrage over fake BBI bill. In the Standard, new BBI bombshell. And in the Star, DP Ruto's fresh 2022 power plan. Quite a varying, thing of headlines. So I want to look at the Standard and the Daily Nation together. And I want to ask, what do the BBI Bill errors, cabinet secretaries in office illegally, and the pause on the Chief Justice interviews all have in common? To be honest, I don't have an answer. But I submit that these three seemingly unrelated events are in fact related.
Yeah.
1. The Standard and the Daily Nation both tell us about how counties received two different versions of the BBI bill. One version was correct and sent as intended, and the other was incorrect and made reference to articles in the Constitution that don't even exist. What is strange here is that the IEBC is the only way for counties to receive the bill.
Yeah.
And because of this, the legality of the process is now in question. 2. This week, we were told that the position of CAS was unconstitutional and that some second-term cabinet secretaries were in office illegally. Currently, the decision has been paused, but this could lead to many people going home and many decisions being undone.
Correct.
And 3. Yesterday, the High Court stopped the JSC from selecting the candidate of Chief Justice. Why? Because all the interviewed candidates had not even met the minimum legal requirement for consideration. Point here, the matter goes to court, and in the meantime, Mwilu stays acting CJ. Now, I call these events unrelated because on the face of it, they are. But I want to examine them through the law of unrelated things. In this case, each event was not caused or inspired by the other, but they have something in common. And this is how political events in Kenya must be examined. So I ask, what do these three events have in common?
Yes.
In our view, the lowest common denominator here is the judiciary. It's no surprise that the courts have become the battleground for decision-making in this country. And in the run-up to 2022, someone has seen this and is taking advantage. How can you invalidate ministry job positions 4 years after they were assigned? How is it that the Chief Justice hopefuls are unsuitable for the role after they sat for interviews? And how is it that the BBI bill was strangely altered, given to counties, and then the error exposed after they had voted yes and sent it to Parliament? The purpose of the law of unrelated things is to interpret actions and make predictions.
Yeah.
These three events do not exist separately. There is a thread connecting all of them, and there is an owner behind that thread.
Yes.
Meanwhile, as too many questions hang in the balance, Ruto is busy setting up subcommittees in 47 counties to seek views from the public. Something smells off. Yeah. CS, what say you?
I'd like to submit that how we interpret laws is so important.
Yeah.
In fact, you have an entire third arm of government known as the judiciary that is dedicated to the interpretation of laws.
Yes.
And today I'd like to confine myself to discussing just that. Firstly, in the realm of interpretation of laws and legal arguments, lawyers and judges sometimes anchor their arguments and thinking in a principle borrowed from philosophy, which is known as parity of reasoning. To put it simply, where you're faced with two problems or challenges that are similar in nature, then it follows that the reasoning or logic you apply in resolving one should also be used in resolving the other. Let us leave that there for a moment. My view is that this emerging BBI fiasco is going to boil down to a contest between whether we lay emphasis on procedure over substance.
Yes.
Both are important and both have their place, but one is more important than the other. In the past, grave mistakes that have cost the country dearly
Yes.
have been made when greater emphasis has been laid on procedure more than substance.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But there is much wisdom in the reverse. That is why in our constitution, for instance, in Article 159, it is written that justice shall be administered without undue regard to procedural technicalities. By parity of reasoning, I'd like to argue that in the case of debating whether or not the right BBI bill was submitted to the counties,
Yes.
we should not give undue regard to procedural technicalities because an unjust outcome may result.
Yes.
Now, do not misunderstand me. If the BBI bills that had been submitted to the counties were different in terms of their substance, then in that case, there would be a real crisis. However, what we are faced with here is a case of typographical errors. One of the bills submitted to the counties erroneously made reference to Article 87.7 instead of 89.7. However, both bills were still discussing the creation of 70 constituencies. In the interpretation of laws, we also often ask ourselves, what was the intention of a
Yes.
legislative assembly in passing a law?
Yeah.
And it is a principle we should also apply here. It is clear that all county assemblies that passed the bill intended that there be created 70 additional constituencies.
Yes.
They also intended that the process of nominating MPs needs to be altered. So as long as the intentions are clear, it would be a travesty and a great injustice to try and derail a speeding BBI train because of undue regard to procedural technicalities. Surely we cannot sacrifice one of the most important constitutional moments in our country's history because of one or two typos.
So true.
It's ridiculous and it stinks of sabotage.
Oh, yes.
Let me ask both of you a question, and I'll be straight. Who benefits if BBI is reversed back to counties?
Cui bono.
Cui bono?
Cui bono. And I think this is in part what CS was getting at. Both the errors in the BBI bill that was sent to some counties, they both spoke to the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They both spoke about the nomination of MPs, the increasing of MP positions. I think that that is to the benefit of,
William Ruto.
yes,
Simple.
to change that, exactly.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And you know what? This reminds me of 2017 when the judiciary under Maraga did a judicial coup. I mean, the annulment of the election was a judicial coup. And
Yeah.
also, a day before the election, the second election, Maraga called for a session of the Supreme Court also, in my view, to annul or to cancel the second election.
Yeah.
That also is tantamount to a judicial coup.
Yeah.
Now, if that is the case, that was the case then, and this is the case now, could it be that there's someone who sponsored the annulment of
and this is why I was going...
of the election could be the same person, the beneficiary of reversing BBI back to counties?
Exactly. And no, this goes back to what I was saying about the Chief Justice interviews right now. If
Precisely.
Mwilu remains the acting CJ and we do not have a new CJ installed, Mwilu and Maraga, same WhatsApp group. Am I
Oh
wrong?
my goodness!
This is a mess. This is a whole, yeah, it's been orchestrated to be so.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
And civil society, you can be sure, is part of this. But
And,
anyway,
and what will
However-
happen is that when you come to constitutional interpretations at the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
you have Mwilu at the helm.
Exactly.
anyway,
Cui
they
bono.
However, we have a three-part criteria as we look at the headlines. We
Yeah.
ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative?
Yeah.
Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? I see we've just discussed the Daily Nation and the Standard, outrage over fake BBI bill, and new BBI bombshell. What do we say?
I think we threw all of them.
I think we toss both of them. Yep.
All of them.
Okay, let's look at
All
the
of
Star
them.
for a moment, though. DP Ruto's fresh 2022 power plan.
Now, I read the Star, and I wanted to pose a question that may annoy many, but I'll pose it anyway. Why does Ruto spend all his time with peasants? What guarantee does he have that peasants will make him president? We ask this question because
We.
presidents, yes,
You.
okay. I ask this question because presidents all over the world are created in boardrooms. Yes, don't get it twisted, people. You are just but a formality in elections. Your votes are just a feel-good rubber stamp. Your president is elected, then you vote, and then we call him elected, period. And therefore, if this is the case, I want to pose this question. If William Ruto had given Uhuru space to rule, while he made contacts in the business world, wouldn't he be president in 2022? If Ruto had kept a low profile from 2017, wouldn't Uhuru Kenyatta have sent him to the Davos Global Summits in Switzerland, or UNGA in New York, or the Ernst & Young Awards in Monte Carlo for internship? Ruto would be living a jet-set life, picking calls from Doha, Washington, Canberra, Rome, Moscow, Lagos, and even Kampala. He would be the king in waiting with the tag of international businessman. And that's because, other than being deputy president, I'm sure he loves making money. Also, we hear. I mean, if you were deputy president today and you were primed for the presidency tomorrow, shouldn't you be meeting Sheikh Al Maktoum of Dubai, or Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi, or Bill Gates of Microsoft, or Aliko Dangote of Nigeria, you know? But because Ruto refused to be mentored by Uhuru, he is using the wrong approach. He calls it bottom up. And by the way, he also borrowed that from Professor Mutahi.
Very true.
Anyway, the bottom up strategy, even when looking for votes on a national level, is the wrong approach. If the wealthy, the political elite, global business conglomerates don't know you, don't know how you operate, can't relate with you, then they are simply not comfortable with you. For instance, how sure is Microsoft or IBM or Amazon that William Ruto is good for business? How sure is Unilever or Vodafone or Philips or VW that their business will not be affected by a Ruto presidency? I mean, if M-Pesa, which is owned by Vodafone, accounts for almost 50% of Kenya's GDP and is controlled from London, why wouldn't the Brits want to know who this Ruto is? My point is simple, people. Ruto was misadvised. He thought if he propagated the hustlers versus dynasties narrative, the peasants will elect him. Zero. Mr. Ruto, sir, those hustlers of yours are too busy worrying about what they will eat tomorrow than your presidential ambitions. The real sphere of influence is your boss and the business world. And that's because if anyone has the power to make you boss, it is them. They have all the time and they have all the money. But more importantly, they'd like to see a familiar face. And that's because like attracts like. People with high-level formal education like to associate with the academic elite. Physically fit people enjoy spending time with others who are fit. Religious people like to have fellowship with people of faith. And rich people like to associate with other rich people. Kusha maneno.
Hopefully he's taking note of all your advice.
Absolutely.
On that note, I think we tossed a star as well.
Yes,
right?
yes. Oh yeah, very far.
We do. And on that note, we have no winning headline, and we also have no winning cartoon.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Rubicon, The Triumph and Tragedy of the Roman Republic by Tom Holland.
And don't forget to like our page, subscribe, and switch on notifications.
Yes, tell them. So this book tells the story of the end of the Roman Republic and the subsequent establishment of the Roman Empire. The book takes its title from the river Rubicon in the northern Italian peninsula. So in 49 BC, Julius Caesar crossed this river with his army and marched on to Rome, breaking a sacred law of the Roman Republic and throwing the nation into a civil war. On this day, January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar made the momentous decision to lead his army across the shallow stream that passed through a portion of northeastern Italy. As I said, this stream was known as the river Rubicon, and it marked the boundary between the Gaul province to the north and Italy proper to the south. So an ancient Roman law forbade any general from crossing this river Rubicon and entering Italy with a standing army. To do so would be considered an act of treason, punishable by a torturous death. Now, the purpose of the law was to protect the Republic from internal military threat. And so crossing the Rubicon would reveal Caesar's ultimate aspirations and mark a point of no return if Caesar brought his troops through Gaul into Italy. And he would be violating his role as provincial authority and essentially declaring himself an enemy of the state and the Senate, which would foment civil war. But the problem is, if he didn't bring his troops into Italy, Caesar would be forced to relinquish his command and likely be forced into exile. He'd give up his military glory and end his political fortune. So he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. In this moment, the Roman Empire was born and the course of history was changed forever. So when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he started a 5-year Roman civil war. And at the war's end, Caesar was declared dictator for life. And as dictator, he presided over the end of the Roman Republic and the start of the Roman Empire. However, I think we all know how that story ends, right?
Absolutely, a lovely book. I won't speak much about the triumph and tragedy. I love the chapter on self-indulgence, but I don't know why I'm telling you this. But you and I know of Ibiza or Monte Carlo or Monaco or Las Vegas as the scene spots for the rich and famous to party and let loose.
Oh boy.
But ladies and gentlemen, you have not heard of BI. That's the city in Rome. BI was Las Vegas or Monte Carlo on steroids. And let me paint a picture for you. BI was the capital of sin in ancient Rome. To the Romans, BI was synonymous with luxury and wickedness. A holiday there was always a source of guilty pleasure. No statesman would ever willingly admit to spending time in a town so notorious. Yet every season, Rome would empty of the upper classes as they headed south to its temptations. It was a spot for the upwardly mobile. Now, the queen of BI and the embodiment of its exclusive nature was the eldest of 3 Claudian sisters. Her name was Claudia Metelli. Rumor has it that she was so stunning, men would go weak at the knees at the sheer sight of her. Claudia, by virtue of marriage as well as breeding, stood at the heart of the Roman establishment. Her husband, Metellus Sulla, came from the only family capable of rivaling the prestige and the arrogance of the Claudi themselves. She was Claudi. Now, Kenyans on Twitter, in BI, if you were broke and you wanted to make it, you had to have 2 things, charm or good looks, or both. Had to choose a struggle. Any of this would have gotten you a seat at the table. In fact, Tom Holland tells us a handsome social climber who had barely come of age might find himself making on familiar terms to a consul. Deals might be struck, patronage secured, charm and good looks might secure pernicious advantage. Why did this chapter excite me again?
I'm not entirely sure. However, yeah, I think all of that self-indulgence does have in part something to do with the rise and fall of empires,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
That need to have more.
Absolutely.
So
I love it.
I helped you connect the dots.
Thank you.
Actually, often decadence precedes the fall of empires.
Oh, yes.
So what we have here is a juxtaposition of 2 visions of leadership. That's what I took away from the book. All through this week, we are studying the fall of empires. Notably, today we are looking at the last years of the Roman Republic. This is not a mistake. Our thesis as students of government is that the Roman Empire fell because it rose on the ruins of a fallen republic. The problem with empires is that they are dependent on good emperors. And because of the nature of power and the complexities of the human condition, emperor-driven empires are unsustainable.
Oh, yes.
Even if you begin with a good philosopher king, the system in time will inevitably beget a corrosive, toxic tyranny. In contrast, the beauty and genius of a republic is that if well designed, the establishment of good institutions beget ever more perfect unions. Republics are not reliant on philosopher kings, however benevolent. Instead, they cast their crown at the feet of philosophy and they cede their throne to a system of just laws. This is why Thomas Paine argued that, for as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king and there ought to be no other.
Yes.
The transition of Rome from republic to empire resulted in Caesar as emperor. But this was preceded by a degeneration or unraveling of norms that were detrimental in the long term.
Yes.
Caesar, having the audacity to cross the Rubicon, risk civil war and the fall of the Republic, rejected the sound norms of the Republic in order to gain to himself the glory of empire.
So selfish.
And it is this kind of degradation of norms that we as Kenyans must watch out for. The erosion of norms starts when politicians convince themselves that their personal ambitions and the good of the Republic are one and the same.
Hint, hint.
They start acting in their own self-interest, but delude us into thinking that it is for our own good. That is why, for instance, you will have an official resident of a deputy president of the republic becoming overshadowed by the cult of personality and is then referred to as the hustler's mansion.
Whoa.
When personal ambition is defined in terms of what is good for the republic, then the trajectory of our republic will become subservient to the whims and desires of those who would be emperors.
Yes.
It is why some would be so arrogant to suggest that in us wanting to gift ourselves a better constitution for the good of the whole nation, we are trying to stop the presidency of one human.
Oh yes, delusion.
And even if we are, ultimately, the amendments we are debating in our time seek to fortify the republic and to save us from emperors before they arrive at the Rubicon.
Yes.
When you hear us advocate for a Matatu presidency in contrast to a Ferrari presidency, we are subscribing to the vision of leadership that is determined to sustain the republic and gift it perpetually to posterity.
Yes.
This is in contrast to the vision of Caesar,
Yes.
who rallied an army of hustlers to win to himself an empire. Let us be wary of politicians who would have us believe that all they need is 51% of the people to support them, and that the 49 other percent don't matter. That's not how an inclusive system is supposed to work. And President Uhuru understands this. His journey has brought him to an understanding that representative democracies are designed to cool down the passions of pure democracy and avail tools of deliberation that result in broad-based consensus.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Oh my goodness, I could not have put that any better.
That hustler mansion thing.
Right?
That
Yeah,
thing
I think you...
should reverberate around the world.
So true. So on a day when we had no winning headline and no winning cartoon, I want to leave you with a quote actually from the book. Gain cannot be made without loss to someone else. But I think that just as CS has put it, maybe that's not how we should be looking at things, right? There needs to be a win-win strategy at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us also on Pang Free to Air, Star Times, and Go TV. Have a lovely evening.